Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Miami, Mayor Francis Suarez.
Thank you so much. I love being in Washington, D.C. It reminds me of my hometown in Miami. Sunny and warm. I really would like to thank Matt and Mercedes and CPAC for this incredible invitation to be here to talk about Miami and its role as a beacon of freedom across our beautiful country. And I'd also like to recognize the brave people of East Palestine, Ohio. They're dealing with a mass contamination event, as you all know, one caused and worsened by the failure of the federal government to lead or act. The people of East Palestine need our help, and they need answers, not photo ops or failures to act. Our government is failing us, and so is our president. I want to especially recognize someone who has led the people of East Palestine, someone who's cared for them, who stood with them, and who continues to stand up for all of them. Mayor Trent Conaway. You see, mayors, we're not like other politicians. We are expected to make a difference, not a statement. We deal in substance, not stunts. Results, not rhetoric. We're expected to deliver, to have answers, not anger. When tragedy strikes, from hurricanes to tornadoes to mass violence and turmoil, our people turn to us. We are there to comfort them. We are there to protect them. And we are there to lead them. These are the values that this conference has defended for decades. But sometimes it seems that many of those who served in Washington dismiss the role of local elected leadership. In Miami, we've embraced the conservative values of keeping everyone safe, keeping everyone's taxes low, and keeping everyone free to innovate and create. It has created the Miami Miracle, a national model that now drives Florida's growth. And as I said, it starts with three simple principles. First, everyone has a right to be safe in public and secure in their home. While other cities made the mistake of defunding their police, we fully funded our police. And you won't be shocked to know what the results were. We had the lowest homicide rate per capita since the 1960s. This freedom has created a true safe place where every citizen can be free. And today's Miami has exposed the lie of the defund police movement. Second, when you cut taxes and regulation, you increase prosperity for everyone. We cut taxes to the lowest level in history. And guess what happened? We grew tremendously by 12%, the second most in our recorded history. So it turns out there's a correlation between less government and more growth. Third, we welcome innovators. We didn't cancel them like other cities. While other cities pushed out their innovators, like famously in New York City, that pushed out Amazon after they won the HQ2 prize. And of course, in California, they said, F Elon Musk. And he replied, message received, and left.
It's going back.
In Miami, when they said, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami, I responded with a simple phrase, how can I help? And because of that, we're number one in the nation in wage growth. We're number one in the nation in tech job growth. We're number one in the nation in pandemic recovery. We're number one, you got it. You get the point, right? So our formula for success and our recipe for success, which we think is scalable to create American prosperity, is simple. Keep taxes low, keep people safe, and we lean into innovation. And that is a formula for America's prosperity. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Place is gonna get lit when Brownie comes out.
Yeah.
It's gonna get crazy. All the Asians are gonna run up there. They love him. Supposed to be 4, might be 4:20, so what do you think? I think Brooke's gonna come over here, probably go upstairs and get ready. I'm gonna have to go up there.
What time is your thing?
7:30. So I don't know. I'd love to stick around for the wedding, but I think I should get going and shower up and change.
I wonder if I gotta get real dressed.
Did you better take it?
No, but I wonder if I can still go.
It's definitely gone. I think they were begging me to buy it. They were sending me texts all day. Did you buy your ticket? They don't even know I bought the ticket already.
I never got a text. Other
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, the Holy Land. Please welcome former Special Assistant to the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Milstein, and host, Biana Schlaf.
Thank you so much for coming. I don't know about you all, but I think one of the best parts of CPAC is we get to see just how big and vibrant the conservative movement is. And not just here in America, but across the globe. CPAC has been partnering with different organizations and doing international CPACs. This summer we had the privilege of going to the Holy Land, which is what we're going to talk about today. So, David, what does it mean that CPAC went to the Holy Land?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here and to be back at CPAC. It was very, very special that CPAC decided to prioritize going to Israel. Israel is one of America's best friends and closest allies in the entire world. And it was an incredible delegation. We went all over the land of Israel. We went up to the Golan Heights and saw Israel's security challenges to its north. We went into Judea and Samaria to see Israel's biblical heartland. We went into Jerusalem and saw the Western Wall, thousands of years of history, also even the city of David, where King David actually established Jerusalem as the capital of the Israelite kingdom going back 3,500 years ago. It was a very, very special trip, but it also goes to show that an organization, CPAC, that is such an important part of the conservative movement, showing the world that the conservative movement and the Republican Party strongly stands by Israel. And so to lead such a high-level delegation, especially at a time when much of the international community, and we've seen some hostility from the Biden administration towards Israel, it's very, very problematic. So for an important organization like CPAC to go to Israel means a tremendous amount.
Yeah, so you mentioned the CPAC delegation. This delegation consisted of 3 U.S. ambassadors who were all greatly helpful in facilitating peace in the Middle East through the Abraham Accords. So David, I was hoping you could tell us, where do the Abraham Accords stand today?
It's a great question. So very briefly, the Abraham Accords came to happen because of 2 main factors. One, it was Prime Minister Netanyahu back in 2015. He came to Congress and spoke out so courageously against an Iran deal that even if Iran followed the deal, it would have paved Iran's path to an arsenal of nuclear weapons. And you combine that with the entrance of the Trump administration, that put aside the failed and misguided false premises of how the U.S. should approach the Middle East in the past, and recognize the importance of standing with Israel, but not just standing with Israel, making historic decisions in support of Israel, like recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, like the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, like recognizing Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, like saying the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria are part of the land of Israel and not illegal. All these historic decisions, much of the foreign policy establishment falsely thought it would actually create more violence in the Middle East, and instead it actually showed that when America stands unequivocally with Israel, when we also, by the way, lead the Iran deal and put maximum sanctions pressure on the Iranian regime, and oh, by the way, knock out Qasem Soleimani, the number one terrorist in the entire world, which President Trump had the courage to order. You do all those things, you actually are able to bring the Gulf Arab states and Israel together. And also you remove what has been a canard in the foreign policy establishment that somehow you need to make or facilitate peace between Israel and the Palestinians first before you try to have a wider peace agreement. And that's not the case. The central cause for violence in the Middle East is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's actually the regime in Tehran that is the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world. So fast forward to the Abraham Accords, the Trump administration was able to facilitate peace between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and even Sudan. And we've seen these things grow, not because of the Biden administration, but in many respects despite the Biden administration. We've seen that in the last 2 months. Israel and Sudan has more finalized their peace agreement. It's an incredibly big deal that Sudan itself was able to turn the page in its approach to Israel, because it was back in 1967, right after the Six-Day War, the Arab League met in Khartoum, which is the capital of Sudan, and declared that there would be no recognition, no peace, and no negotiation with Israel. And now you've seen that completely change. You've seen a country that was helping the Iranians and Hamas and all these other terrorist organizations push that all aside, and now they've made genuine peace with Israel. You've seen Saudi Arabia, while not yet part of the Abraham Accords, allow flights over its airspace, Israeli airlines to fly over its airspace, which is a really, really big deal. And you've also seen, actually just a few weeks ago, Oman, which still also, like Saudi Arabia, doesn't have formal ties to Israel, also allow Israeli flights to fly over its airspace. And all this is happening and growing, particularly also at the commercial level. We're seeing billions and billions of dollars in investment between Israel and these Gulf Arab states. And it's a war peace. It's coming from the bottom up. And so that shows that these things are going to continue to last. And it's a very special thing to watch and be part of.
And one last question. Why is it important that America keep Israel as a strategic ally?
Absolutely. So very quickly, we have roughly 50 seconds left. Unfortunately, we've seen calls in the Democrat Party, particularly the Squad, slander Israel, who call for conditioning or eliminating military assistance to Israel. And just very quickly, I want to say that really America has no better friend in the world, in my view, than Israel. That military assistance that we provide Israel, which is $3.8 billion a year, is a drop in the bucket to the return on investment that we receive from Israel, the intelligence cooperation, the technology sharing. The fact is that Israel simply asks for military assistance and the capabilities it needs to defend itself by itself. And when it shares our values and when it shares our enemies, they're basically an outpost for America in one of the most dangerous regions of the world. So it's more important than ever that all of us come together to strongly support Israel, because supporting Israel is in America's national security interest as well.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Get ready to run.
Run.
You're gonna run up to the stage and jump up.
Ready?
Hi, Hot Damn. How you doing? Waiting for Steve Bannon to come on stage. Another panel now. Looks like they're gonna have another panel of people. Maybe another 20 minutes.
Did that guy really say we're gonna have special seats here?
Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess they would give us seats because once we get done back there, if we come back here, we'll never get in this room. Like, we'll never be able to come in here on our own.
I wouldn't. I'd just go home. If you're gonna be in the room with them, I really don't care about watching the stream. I think that they're gonna give you a seat in here. But I'm just saying, like, mission accomplished. Come on now. I'll watch it from a screen in the back room. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying if that's what's going to happen, they're going to say, all right, well, go be with everybody else. I don't know, who said what? What did this guy say to us?
I don't remember.
All he said was that he's going to see the president tomorrow. He's going to see him. And he's going to show you the picture of him. So who told you that you were going to meet him?
We were going to the reception.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Israel's democracy via the deep state. Please welcome Director of the Center for Middle East and International Law at the Antonin Scalia School of Law, Eugene Kantorovich, host of the Josh Hammer Show, Josh Hammer, and your moderator, CPAC Senior Fellow for Israel and Jewish Affairs, Yitz Tenler.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. It's in the 200s, right?
Yeah, but we're 25.
But he's still, there's a lot of people going to be going to meet Trump. You know what I mean?
Hey, good afternoon, CPAC.
I think it's going to be like a mini rally.
It is so great to be here with two towering legal minds and great patriots, American patriots, Josh Hammer and Professor Eugene Kantorovich, to talk about a bunch of exciting issues. But before we talk about those issues, I know this is a very biblically literate audience. And you all are familiar with the Book of Esther, which is a book which will be read by Jews around the world in just a few days. We're celebrating the anniversary of the miracles that occurred in those books. And it's an ancient story of anti-Semitism and a miraculous salvation that the Lord allowed the Jewish people at the time to be saved. Looking at America today, a question for my two panelists here. What are some thoughts you have about Jew hatred today in the United States of America? Some parallels you see, some insights? Josh, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so great to be back at CPAC. So, look, I mean, our stance when it comes to Jew hatred, anti-Semitism should be clear, unequivocal, unambiguous. We despise it, we loathe it, it has no part of our movement whatsoever. Period. Full stop, end of story. And I'm grateful to CPAC and to Matt Schlapp, who had a very powerful statement condemning Nick Fuentes just yesterday. But we've seen these outbursts just from all across the spectrum, whether it's the Ilhan Omar on the far left, to Kanye West and Nick Fuentes. I'm not even going to call them the far right, I won't dignify them with that term, but wherever it comes from, we have an obligation to condemn it. It is evil, and that's it. Well, that's it.
Why don't they go to a fucking liberal feed?
Why don't they go to somebody who gets viewers? I got 6 people watching, 2 of them trolls.
Get out, trolls.
Anti-Semitism makes the largest number of Jews safe. And the largest number of Jews in the world live in the state of Israel. And a political program even if it doesn't announce itself as anti-Semitic. It limits Israel's ability to defend
Biden's
itself.
got to come on
It
after
supports the Palestinian Authority as it pays for the murder of Jews. It calls for
Biden's gonna
areas of
stumble out
Jews'
like,
historical homeland, Judea and Samaria, to be off limits for Jews. The Judenrein, that is a program that is in practice anti-Semitic and demands by the current administration that Jews not live in parts of their biblical homeland. It's hard to come up with a nice name.
Thank you, Eugene. Okay. On to some of the more wonky issues to discuss. The topic of this panel has to do with Israel's judicial reform. Many of you here in this audience probably know there's a lot of uproar around judicial reform in Israel specifically. And recently, Josh, you wrote an article called, which included the term "much ado about nothing." That all this uproar is a little bit overblown, it's a little bit exaggerated. Can you share a little bit over why you think that?
Sure. So, I actually debated Alan Dershowitz on this very issue just a few nights ago. So, what's happening in Israel, for those of you who follow the news, you've seen the protests in the streets of Tel Aviv, hundreds of thousands of people just going out there, probably have no idea what in the world they're talking about, to be totally candid with you. And the very first thing to say about what's happening in Israel, from my perspective, is that we shouldn't care. This debate is fundamentally a constitutional separation of powers debate internal to the state of Israel. And the very fact that the world purports to care, that President Joe Biden saw fit to stick his neck out and condemn the Netanyahu government, that is indicative itself of an anti-Semitic double standard, because there is no other country in the world that would be debating a separation of powers dispute between its legislature and its court that would attract the eyes of the United Nations and all of these liberals. The key point, and I'll turn it over to Eugene after this, the key point to bear in mind when it comes to the judicial reform debate in Israel is that the Israeli Supreme Court has arrogated more power to itself than any court in the entire Western world. Anyone in the entire country can effectively bring any lawsuit at any time for any reason whatsoever. And the key part here, in the United States, when you litigate to the United States Supreme Court, the court is going to cite the Constitution if they're going to strike down a statute. Over there, you can strike down a law because it is unreasonable. So these liberal secular elites get elected to the Supreme Court, totally override the entire right-wing government. It's a total travesty, but thankfully I think that we're going to get it passed.
Yeah, so you're going to hear in Israel that Israel is taking measures that undermine America's shared values with Israel. And nothing can be further from the truth. Because let's talk about what the actual situation is in Israel. In Israel, there is a deep state. There is a small group of elite lawyers and technocrats that have managed to control the country such that elections don't matter. And as they say in Israel, vote right, get left. Because even when you elect a right-wing government, the judges and other bureaucrats prevent right-wing policies from being implemented. So this is what they're doing in Israel that's supposedly against American values. They're discussing having politicians have some role in picking the judges. Currently, the judges are picked by a committee controlled by themselves. In other words, sitting Supreme Court judges control the committee, a bunch with a few other lawyers, that picks their own successors. So we're talking about having politicians have some role in the appointment of judges. The Supreme Court in Israel has said that it can consider whether amendments to Israel's pseudo-constitution, the laws that they have claimed are constitutional, they can declare constitutional amendments unconstitutional as against the true higher secret liberal constitution that only they are privy to. So they can strike down constitutional amendments. And they have said that the Attorney General, who you'd think is the government's lawyer, can veto any government policy without as much as a written opinion. So if the government wants to do reform on the borders, refugee policy, the government now, as it's talking about, to have a death penalty for terrorists, the Attorney General says, the court's not going to like it, and that's the end of it. And the Attorney General in Israel can come and actually argue in court against the government. The Supreme Court has also declared that it has the power to impeach effectively the Prime Minister and remove officials elected by the people. So those are the things we're trying to change in a way that's going to make Israel only more like America, strengthen democracy, and strengthen the values that we hold in common with other Western democracies.
Looking out at this great audience, I see what we call the grassroots core of the conservative movement here in the United States of America. So a two-part question for both of you. Number one is, why should your average rank-and-file CPAC attendee care so much about judicial reform in Israel, number one? Number two is, practically speaking, as activists, what can our activists do to move the needle on this issue?
So great questions. First, I just want to very briefly emphasize something that Eugene said, because I think it's an important point to drive home. So what Eugene has accurately said is that the court over there has taken unto itself the ability to overturn the Constitution itself. So that is basically the equivalent here of if you have a liberal United States Supreme Court of literally just repealing the Second Amendment, of saying you do not actually have a right to own guns. It is a truly insane system. I just want to underscore that point. Now, why should the grassroots here care? Well, I have a few reasons for that. One is it's important to bear in mind that what's happening there, so Netanyahu, who I'm a fan of, obviously, he's firmly right of center. His coalition is probably the most right-wing coalition in the history of the Jewish state of Israel in its 75-year history. They cannot get anything done. They literally cannot do anything unless judicial reform passes first, because no matter what they do, the court can then just strike it down on the most arbitrary grounds possible, because it is unreasonable to try to incorporate parts of Judea and Samaria into Israel or some other policy that you can possibly think of. So if you support the U.S.-Israel alliance, if you support the Benjamin Netanyahu government, you have a duty, I think, to care about judicial reform, because literally it just won't. One other reason I think to care about this is that the analogies for what the Netanyahu government is going through compared to what Donald Trump went through for his 4 years are incredibly stark. The parallels are actually, I would say, are possibly outright eerie. So both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have been indicted and are being prosecuted for incredibly frivolous, legally dubious grounds. I think would be a mild way of saying it. And just as you have judicial oligarchy over there, Trump fought the deep state. It's the exact same thing. That's why this panel is called the deep state. You have a cloistered cluster of homogenous groupthink liberals who are trying to overturn the will of the democratically elected right-of-center government. That was the exact dynamic Donald Trump faced. It's the exact dynamic Netanyahu's facing now. It's very similar, actually, in a way, to kind of what happened in Brazil recently. Poland, Hungary, other countries around the world have faced similar struggles. But it is our duty as conservatives in the U.S., Hungary, Brazil, Israel, wherever, to kind of stand in unison and support one another's efforts.
It's amazing, and it's almost like it's part of a divine plan. But when you look at the history of Israel, Israel is always at the forefront of fighting every challenge to freedom faced by the West. During the Cold War, Israel was the forward bastion in the Middle East against Soviet communism. During the past 20 years, Israel is at the forefront of the fight against political Islamism. And today, there's a new phenomenon that we see, and we see it in Europe, and we see it throughout the world, which is a threat to democracy that comes from inside Western institutions that seek to redefine democracy. And that's what's happening in Israel. And if they succeed in Israel, it's not going to stop in Israel. There is a new definition of democracy. When they say that they're planning to make this, to end democracy in Israel, obviously they mean promote democracy, as in not have the people as elected officials removable by an elite priestly class that is unelected and unresponsive to people. But they say, you know what? Democracy no longer means people vote for the government. Democracy means you get the policy results arrived at by, let's say, Germany and France 2 years ago, or you're not democratic. Democracy is about results, right? It's like the new definition of equality. Either you achieve all of the social policies we think are important, or you're not democratic. And that idea is going to come here. It's also an idea about the rule of experts. The rule of experts, and we saw where that got us during the COVID pandemic. But there's something that the American grassroots supporters of Israel, people here at CPAC, and it's so important, I know, for people in Israel to have your support. There's a few things you can do. Normally, I would say Israel's constitutional structure, Israel's political system, is a matter for Israelis. But now that Secretary of State Blinken, now that President Biden have gotten involved, now that they are targeting these reforms, It's important for you to talk to your senators. It's important for American politicians, American activists to be loudly heard in Israel as saying, if you have political selection of judges, we're still going to be friends with you. Of course, we have political selection of judges here in America. And it's important for Israelis to hear that message because they're feeling very isolated. Now, there's another tactic that is being used by opponents of reform. They are creating a climate of crisis and hysteria to scare off foreign investors and try to isolate Israel economically. Israel is a small country, and this is something that scares even people who support the reforms, are afraid that it's going to scare off foreign investors, foreign tourists. So now it's more important than ever. If you have a business deal with Israel, do it. If you want to go to Israel, now is the time to do it. It's important for Israel to feel that they're not going to be isolated as a result of not wanting to be governed by an unelected, self-selecting group of lawyers.
So I want to just emphasize one other key point that Eugene made here, which is this conflation, and it is a disingenuous conflation that the left in Israel and the left in the United States makes between democracy on the one hand and liberalism or progressivism on the other hand. So the judicial reform package that the Netanyahu government is pushing is by very definition of the word democracy. It is pro-democracy, it is democratic, it is trying to take power back to the people away from unaccountable elites. If you think back to the Dobbs decision, which was a heroic and courageous decision from the Supreme Court last June, the left did the exact same thing here. They said that this was an anti-democracy, anti-democratic move to overturn the wretched decision of Roe versus Wade. But if you think about it, Dobbs was the most pro-democracy decision imaginable. It literally gave power back to the people to decide that the unborn child is worth protecting under the rule of law. So there's a very plug-in crowd here, so I would just remind you, be very, very, very vigilant about what the left does here. It is very clever and disingenuous, but they know exactly what they're doing. Democracy is not the same thing as liberalism. You can be pro-democracy and conservative, or pro-democracy and liberal, but there are increasingly few of those out there, I think.
And Israel's at the forefront of this battle right now and needs your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you all. God bless you all. Thanks for everything that all of you do.
Welcome, host of War Room, Steve Bannon.
Or there's a crisis coming, but that's not the case. There's no longer a gathering storm. The storm is here. The storm is here. This is the most dangerous time in world history since the late 1930s, early 1940s. And how did we get here? Our betters, our elites led us here step by step by step. What you have now is you have two converging crises. A crisis of capital markets and economics, and a crisis of geopolitical and military. And they're converging very rapidly, and then they're going to conflate. And once they conflate, they're going to spin out of control. And it's anybody's bet. Now remember, we came off of, on 3 November of 2020, 4 years of peace and prosperity. The interest rate, the 10-year Treasury in the evening of 3 November, when Fox News illegitimately called it for the opposition and not Donald J. Trump, of which our nation has never recovered, the interest rate on 10-year Treasury was 0.8%. 0.8%. Today, for the first time, and God knows when, the entire structure of our interest rates from 1-month treasuries to 30-year treasuries went over 4%. Do you understand that the system is set up of debt? It cannot take those type of interest rates. You will be absolutely crushed. The people crushed the most are the millennials that now have $9 trillion of debt. They are going to be Russian serfs. They're not going to own anything with no possibility of owning anything. Professor Rubini just told us about the financial aspects of it. We're going to have recession, inflation, stagflation, depression, debt crisis. Dr. Doom, who called 2008, said it's only going to get worse because the world's got $300 trillion of debt. Now let's talk about the United States, right? What do we have? $32 trillion of debt? That's nothing. The CBO reports you're going to have another $20 trillion of debt in 10 years. You're going to be paying $1 trillion a year in interest payments. It's not sustainable. Who got us here? Well, Joe Biden, yeah, but he got here because of the compromise made by the establishment Republicans in the Senate. They took away the gavel from you. What are they doing right now? You need dramatic cuts. You need dramatic cuts in spending right now, and not 1 penny increase to the debt ceiling, not 1 penny. If you prioritize the payments, there's plenty of cash. The cash comes in, we pay off the interest. We pay off any securities that come due. We never default on the debt ever. We pay off Social Security and Medicare. And then we have to have a conversation, right? We have to have a conversation. It's not an easy conversation. All the easy decisions of decades ago. Now, on top of that, this converges, right? This converges on the geopolitical situation. Look what happened since Trump left office. You have the Ayatollahs in Iran, right? Tell us how safe do our allies in Israel feel right now? How safe do they feel? Ayatollahs going to Beijing, having a military ceremony, going to bring Xi to Tehran. You got the merger of the KGB and the CCP. You've got Erdogan. You have our great allies in Saudi Arabia already taking and transferring oil to Chinese currency away from the US dollar. You have North Korea and the radical jihadis in Pakistan. You have a convergence on the Eurasian landmass. And what are we doing? We're turning over our foreign policy to Zelensky to let him determine whether he's going to go take Crimea or not. In all of this convergence, where's Merrick Garland today? Is Merrick Garland at DOJ trying to arrest all the infiltration by the Chinese Communist Party in this country? Is he at DOJ helping Ray say, oh, well, they won't help us on the Wuhan lab. You know, maybe we need help. He's in Ukraine. He's in Ukraine. Yellen goes to Ukraine. She doesn't go to East Palestine, Ohio. She goes to Ukraine. The convergence of these two crises is going to lead us into a third world war. A third world war that are not only going to wipe you out economically and financially in this country, more important, your sons and daughters are going to die on foreign battlefields. Are you prepared for that? Do you support that? I can't hear you. Do you support it or not? Because Because if you don't stand up and fight it, it's going to happen. You can't put all this just on Donald J. Trump. This has to be the American people. You underwrite the entire system. Are you prepared to fight back? Are you prepared to sit down and just take it? The elites say you're too stupid, you're too lazy, and you're too disconnected watching television and watching the bread and circus of modern culture to care. Is that true? Are you sure? Because you underwrite the whole system. The neoliberal, neocon system globally is underwritten by you. Your taxes, your pension money, the insurance money, and most importantly, your sons and daughters. You're the one that can tell Congress, hey, not one increase to the debt ceiling, and we want to see massive cuts. We want to see massive cuts in spending, and we want to see it now, not next year. Don't give me some happy talk formula. Don't give me some set of mathematics. I want to see real cuts. Now, when you talk about real cuts, and Russell Rhodes put it out, the president, Biden's always running around talking about it, $2 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years, I think, in Medicaid. These are going to be tough cuts, okay? They get the woke and weaponization. I don't think everyone's going to be a fight, a tough fight. But think about it for a second. We have to cut trillions of dollars out of our budget every year to accumulate to trillions of dollars over the next 10 years. Everyone's going to be ugly, right? We're giving $200 billion to Ukraine. We're paying their pensions. We're paying their health care. The people under 35, you have pensions that the government's paying for right now? You do not. Do you have full health care? You do not. We are underwriting, which Europe will not underwrite. I have no problem at all. If the Ukrainian people want to fight a Slavic war for the Russian-speaking eastern border of Ukraine, and if they want to go to Crimea and take it back, God bless them. And the Europeans are going to pay for it. We've paid enough in the wars in Europe. We're not a European power. We're a Pacific power. I need them on Capitol Hill and at Wall Street in the city of London to hear you. Can I hear you? Are you going to send your sons and daughters to this war? No. This is a room of veterans, and this is a room of patriots that have served their country. Now, let me tell you where the hard part gets. The hard part gets, we've had the oligarchs on the Republican Party, the big hedge fund guys making $16 billion a year, Ken Griffin and Mitch McConnell and Rupert Murdoch. They have told you that Donald J. Trump is not going to be the president of the United States. The primary stuff. You have good and decent people. Governor DeSantis, Mike Pompeo, Tim. Not relevant. We don't have time for on-the-job training for a man that gave us 4 years of peace and prosperity. Show us what Mitch McConnell has given us. Show us what the Murdochs, a bunch of foreigners, have given us. What have they given this country? Nothing. Donald J. Trump, let me repeat, in a very volatile time in American history, gave us 4 years of peace and prosperity. And you know why? You know why? He put you in the room to make decisions. Out of the room, out of the deal. And Trump not only put you in the room, he put you at the head of the table. They don't hate him because he's Trump. They hate him because he represents you. He gives you a voice, and he will not back down. Look at Fox News. Look at Fox News. The president announces his, this is historic. A guy gave you 4 years of peace and prosperity, announces he's going to run again after having it stolen in broad daylight, of which they participate in. They cover it live for 20 minutes, and then they say, if there's anything newsworthy, we'll cut back, and they go to some panel and some discussion. Note to Fox senior management, when Donald J. Trump talks, it's newsworthy. happened in the first week of January? You had Matt Gaetz and Boebert and the Magnificent Six that stood there and put it all on the line. And what did Fox News do? They rolled out Paul Rose and the hats from the Bush administration that got us in this mess and said, we need unity. We need unity. Go, look, Turner. We're not looking for unity. We're looking for victory. We're looking to save our country. We are not, what they mean by unity is you to give up and you to roll over. This is how you get $32 trillion in debt, going to $52 trillion in debt. This is how you get your kid that died on foreign battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan and now in Ukraine. That's how you do it, and we're not going to have it anymore. Donald J. Trump is not simply a leader of a political party. He is not a politician. He is a leader of the most powerful political movement in American history. Okay, Murdoch, here's the way it's going to be, brother. You've disrespected Donald J. Trump long enough.
That's
okay?
right. Yep.
He goes to East Palestine and gets the Biden administration. It's a global news event, and you don't cover it live. Is there that much happening on Fox News at 2 in the afternoon that you can't cover him live? He hasn't been on Fox News since he announced for presidency. Let me ask you. Any guy that brought peace to the world for 4 years until the Chinese let off a bioweapon, right? Wouldn't you think, to have respect for the audience, you would have him back up here to talk about the geopolitics? What if you had respect for people, wouldn't you do that? They don't respect you. Read the depositions. The deposition, they have a fear, a loathing, and contempt for you. And you're the ones that can make changes. The shareholders, if you want your share price to stay up, you need to take action. The first thing you need to do is get rid of Paul Ryan as an independent director. If Paul Ryan's saying that Trump wins, he's not going to go, then you got to get rid of him. The Murdochs immediately have to start covering President Trump. No special deals. Just cover the man. Ask him the tough questions. But we need to hear the voice of Donald J. Trump. Hey, and old man Murdoch, while you're at it, why don't you no more softball interviews with the guys running against him, and no more infomercials, okay? Play it straight. You play it straight, Donald Trump's going to win the primary, and Donald Trump's going to win the presidency. Let me leave you with what Trump is up against. He's not up against DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Mike Pompeo. He's up against Ken Griffin and Mitch McConnell and Murdoch. Okay? They have deemed if he wins the primary, they're going to work for the Democrats, just like they worked for Hillary Clinton. I was there. I can tell you they were in Clinton's camp the entire way. All they are is about money. And the only people can stop them on the face of the earth are you, and you. MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Remember, Murdoch, you've deemed Trump's not going to be president. Well, we've deemed that you're not going to have a network because we're going to fight you every step of the way. If your task and purpose is to take your country back, this country will be saved.
How you doing, everybody? That was a big part of why I came here.
Get your fucking countryside.
I don't know who else is coming up, but I think I gotta get going. Uh-oh, I broke it.
Did you break it? Don't fix it. Fix it. What are you doing? Get a shower?
Yeah, let's check out the war room. Let's see. You want to get over there for Carrie? About an hour long.
ladies and gentlemen, please welcome leader of Brexit and host.
From a lawsuit. I don't care what they think. I think what I think. Look.
We've got for 45 minutes, Al Michael, but to keep you in time, those who don't get a lot of speakers in, he's hacked a lot of it.
Coming into the hotel now, bro?
I've never heard that before, but it works. That's how it goes. So listen, you talked about the disaster. I saw this clip, everybody saw this clip. And we thought of you. Because the jokes write themselves, but it's serious stuff. So there have been these near misses on planes, like several really close calls. People think there's something wrong with the system. And Karen, flying into DC, had a near miss.
On the run, ready to approach. We were, I don't know how many hundred feet from the set this place back up in the sky with no explanation for people on the plane, no explanation whatsoever.
Another round.
We had a hiccup up here.
Okay, so that's the guy. So the guy or woman who runs the FAA, he wants these guys to be safe. Did I tell you about Biden's guy, Phil Lawson? There was a hearing today in the Senate where his company, hopefully he won't be asked a series of questions about aerodynamics. I don't think the guy's ever...
It's all right, Jennifer. I really don't care.
And it's more like how many passengers per airplane.
Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong.
Categories and what altitude you can fly. So, and
We're about to film right here, so you can't come
okay, let's keep going. 3 aircraft. Again, what I would say to that is that you have first priorities with the fully implemented. That's type certificate, production certificate. Let's just keep going so we can get lucky here. So can you tell me what the minimum separation distance is? Landing in the parking airlines.
Yeah, okay. What does that mean? Tell me what that means. I don't care. No, it's how what Bannon say about Fox News. I haven't watched Fox in 2 years. I don't give a no. Let me know when you read it. I think we.
Anything? You got anything you know how to